We read in fairy tales about human beings whom mermaids and mermen enticed into their powers by demonic music. In order to break the enchantment, it was necessary in the fairy tale for the person who was under the spell to play the same piece of music backwards, without making a single mistake. This is very profound, but very difficult to perform, and yet so it is. The errors one has taken into oneself one must eradicate in this way, and every time one makes a mistake one must begin all over. Therefore it is important to choose, and to choose in time. You, on the contrary, have another method, for I know very well that the polemical side you turn towards the world is not your true nature. Yea, if to deliberate were the proper task for a human life, you would be pretty close to perfection. I would adduce an example. To fit your case, the contrast must be bold. Either a parson or an actor. Here is the dilemma. Now all your passionate energy is awakened. Reflection with its 100 arms lays hold of the thought of being a parson. You find no repose. Day and night you think of it. You read all the books you can lay your hands on. You go to the church 3 times every Sunday, pick up the acquaintance with parsons, write sermons yourself, deliver them to yourself. For half a year you are dead to the whole world. You can now talk of the clerical calling with more insight, and apparently with more experience, than many who have been parsons for 20 years. When you encounter such men, it arouses your indignation that they do not know how to get the thing off their chests with more eloquence. Is this enthusiasm, you say? Why, I, who am not a parson, who have not consecrated myself to this calling, speak with the voice of angels as compared to them. That perhaps is true enough, but nevertheless you have not become a parson. Then you act in the same way with respect to the other task, and your enthusiasm for art almost surpasses your clerical eloquence. Then you are ready to choose. However, one may be sure that in the prodigious thought production you were engaged in, there must have been lots of waste products, many incidental reflections and observations. Hence, the instant you have to choose, life and animation enter into this waste mass. A new either-or presents itself. Jurist, perhaps advocate. This has something in common with both the other alternatives. Now you are lost. For that same moment you are at once advocate enough to be able to prove the reasonableness of taking the third possibility into account. So your life drifts on. After you have wasted 1.5 years on such deliberations, after you have with admirable energy exerted to the utmost the powers of your soul, you have not got one step further. You break the thread of thought, you become impatient, passionate, scolding and storming, and then you continue. Either hairdresser or bank teller, I say merely either or. What wonder then that this saying has become for you an offense and foolishness, that it seems, as you say, as if it were like the arms attached to the Iron Maiden, whose embrace was the death penalty. You treat people superciliously. You make sport of them, and what you have become is what you most abhor, a critic, a universal critic of all faculties. Sometimes I cannot help smiling at you, and yet it is pitiful to see how your really excellent gifts are thus dissipated. Therefore you have chosen, not to be sure, as you yourself will admit, the better part. But in reality you have not chosen at all, or it is in an improper sense of the word you have chosen. Your choice is an ascetic choice, but an ascetic choice is no choice. The act of choosing is essentially a proper and stringent expression of the ethical. Whenever in a stricter sense there is question of an either-or, one can always be sure that the ethical is involved. The only absolute either-or is the choice between good and evil, but that is also absolutely ethical. The ascetic choice is either entirely immediate, and to that extent no choice, or it loses itself in the multifarious. He who would define his life task ethically has ordinarily not so considerable a selection to choose from. On the other hand, the act of choice is not so much a question of choosing the right as of the energy, the earnestness, the pathos with which one chooses. Thereby the personality announces its inner infinity, and thereby, in turn, the personality is consolidated. Therefore, even if a man were to choose the wrong, he will nevertheless discover, precisely by reason of the energy with which he chose, that he had chosen wrong. For the choice being made with the whole inwardness of his personality, his nature is purified, and he himself brought into immediate relation to the eternal power whose omnipresence interpenetrates the whole of existence. This transformation, this higher consecration, is never attained by that man who chooses merely ascetically. The rhythm in that man's soul, in spite of all its passion, is only a spiritus lenis. So, like a Cato, I shout at you my either-or, and yet not like a Cato, for my soul has not yet acquired the resigned coldness which he possessed. But I know that only this incantation, if I have the strength for it, will be capable of rousing you, not to an activity of thought, for of that you have no lack, but to earnestness of spirit. Perhaps you will succeed without that in accomplishing much, perhaps even in astonishing the world, for I am not niggardly. And yet you will miss the highest thing, the only thing which truly gives meaning to life. Perhaps you will gain the whole world and lose your own self. That was a reading from Soren Kierkegaard's Either Or, Volume 2, February 20, 1843. Equilibrium. Walter Lowry translation, 1944. Revised by Howard Johnson, 1972. Princeton University Press, second printing, 1974. Pages 168 to 172.